The Greenland ice sheet is losing 1 million tons of water a minute. And it could be showing up on your doorstep soon. Check this out. Michael Mann, one of the world's leading climate scientists, drops by to discuss it. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm so happy to have with me the smartest man I know, the distinguished professor of meteorology, the director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Penn State University, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, author of several books, including The Madhouse Effect, How Climate Change Denial is Threatening Our Planet, Destroying Our Politics, and Driving Us Crazy, the recipient of the Tyler Prize, Dr. Michael Mann. His website, michaelmann.net. Mann has 2 N's at the end, and his Twitter handle, Michael E. Mann. And Dr. Mann, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. The news headline in The Guardian a week or so ago was the Greenland ice sheet is losing 1 million tons of water per minute. What does that mean? That's hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's good to be with you. And unfortunately, that is true. We are seeing unprecedented rates of melting of both the major ice sheets, the Greenland ice sheet and the most susceptible part of the Antarctic ice sheet, the West Antarctic ice sheet. And that's happening decades ahead of schedule relative to the projections from climate models just, a decade or so ago. So the good news, as bad as that sounds, is that there is no evidence that we are yet past sort of the tipping point where we are committed to the melting of those ice sheets. There were some headlines about a week ago that implied that we had crossed that tipping point. And scientists who study the dynamics of ice sheets tell us that's not true. In particular with Greenland, it's sort of shaped like a bowl with the mountains at the exterior and then lower elevation sort of valley in the middle. And because of that, unlike the Antarctic ice sheet, it's very unlikely that it will continue to calve in very large pieces out into the ocean. What happens is as you start to lose parts of the periphery of the ice sheet, it establishes a new, what we call a grounding line, where the bedrock and the ice come into contact. And so it's sort of a bit of a stopper valve. It's unlikely to collapse catastrophically. That having been said, if we warm the planet up much beyond where we are, then we do think that we come close, if not cross the line, where we do ultimately commit to the melting of most of the Greenland ice sheet, most of the West Antarctic ice sheet, enough ice melt to give us about 20 or more feet of global sea level rise. And obviously that would be catastrophic.
Yeah, to say the very least. A week or so ago, there was an event, a weather event in Iowa. Actually, it spanned several states. That was a word I had never heard, and maybe I'm just poorly informed or something. But this Derecho, Derecho, this that left 100,000 people without power. That knocked back mail service. People weren't getting their medications. Thousands of families in makeshift tents. It was a full-blown disaster. What is a Derecho, and why have we not heard about them before now? Or
I think it's Derecho. Derecho, and until a few years ago, we all thought it was something that you get at a Mexican restaurant, but no, in reality, it is. It's an atmospheric phenomenon. It's sort of in some ways it's like a tornado, but rather than twisting winds, it's an entire squall line of thunderstorms that are extremely broad, that can reach, across much of the Midwest, for example, and just comes sweeping across the country. And so you get this line, literally this sweeping line of tornadic winds, tornado, strength winds. It arises for the same reason, ultimately, that intense thunderstorms and tornadoes and hurricanes, like the one that we have just seen bear down on the Gulf Coast. They derive their energy in substantial part from the heat that's released when you evaporate moisture. And in particular, in this case, with the Derecho, when you have a very cold or relatively cool, let's say, Arctic air mass, and it comes down and it meets one of these very humid, subtropical sort of Gulf of Mexico air masses, that contrast in air masses along with the amount of energy that's available with all that moisture, leads to a lot of an instability in the atmosphere, towering clouds, and very strong storms. And these derechos appear to be becoming more common. In fact, Washington, D.C. a few years ago experienced something much like this. It was a derecho that actually happened during an historic heat wave. You may remember, folks who lived in the D.C. area, you have unprecedented sort of triple-digit heat indices, and all of a sudden you lose all the electricity because of this derecho, this storm. And ironically, the same atmospheric conditions that led to the derecho are responsible for the extreme heat, the very warm, humid air mass that was there at the time. And so all of a sudden you're without electricity, you're without air conditioning. And it's sort of an example of the types of surprises and unintended consequences that we worry about, things that we haven't really gamed out, that we wouldn't have thought about until they happen, like, unprecedented heat followed by the loss of electricity because of these very strong winds associated with these derechos. So we think climate change is making the conditions more favorable for them, and they're devastating, right? We saw how devastating that storm was for people who live in the Midwest. Iowans destroyed much of the agriculture that was there at the time. Crops were destroyed by this storm. These are the sorts of, when people talk about, it's going to cost us if we get off fossil fuels, it's costing us way more by remaining addicted to fossil fuels. And this is just one example of why. And I say that as we see a devastating storm making landfall in the east, and we see the West literally on fire.
So just to summarize, these derechos are caused by extraordinarily warm, moist air rising. And typically that would be associated with a tropical climate or a semi-tropical climate. But because the Midwest has been heating up as a result of global warming, and the Midwest is rich in moisture, they get a lot of rain, their soil is moist, and so that soil heats up unusually high, thus evaporating unusual amounts of moisture and transporting heat up into the atmosphere where it hits cold air coming in, and boom, you've got a derecho. Is that it? And that's the mechanism that global warming is, simply by warming up the area, it's producing this?
Yeah, it's what's happening. It's more or less what you just said. You have more of these very warm, humid air masses, and climate change, allows for more humidity in the atmosphere. A warmer atmosphere holds more humidity. So you've got a warmer, moister, more unstable atmosphere. And the match that lights, that fire is the collision with a cool, dry air mass, because then you get these very large contrasts, all of a sudden temperature, really strong sort of fronts. And those contrasts in temperature really start to get the atmosphere rising. The warm air rises over the cold air vertically. You get this deep convection. You get very strong storms and very strong winds. And so one of the crucial ingredients there are the very warm, humid air masses that we expect to see more of in a warmer climate. You're always going to have that source of relatively cool, dry air in the Arctic. That's always going to be there, but is coming into it's basically colliding with increasingly warmer, moister air masses, creating those conditions for these derechos, thunderstorms, tornadoes, and other types of extreme weather events.
Michael, we just have 15 seconds till we hit the break. If Biden gets elected and does something about the climate, is there still time?
Yeah, absolutely. There is, as I like to say, great urgency. We have to act now. There is agency. There is still time to act. And if we vote on this issue, we vote on climate in the upcoming election, we can make a real difference here.